remarkable young man taught himself Hebrew because he said he wanted to learn the devil's language. That's how he described it. He taught himself Hebrew at age 14, and then he started reading about Israel and about Judaism in its original language. And he realized he'd been taught lies. And today, he's a speaker for Stand With Us, and he fights anti-Semitism and anti-Israel propaganda. But think about that. Lord Voldemort. That is the uniqueness of anti-Semitism when you compare it to all other forms of bigotry and racism. In the world of the anti-Semite, it is often implied or expressly stated that Jewish conspirators are in league with the devil. It is why both the far-right neo-Nazi murderer at the Tree of Life posted on Gab that Jews are, quote, the children of Satan, and it is why a man that this Bowers character certainly would not agree with on anything else, Louis Farrakhan, also repeats over and over again the same line. The Jews are part of the synagogue of Satan. It is why this vile murderer of our brothers and sisters of the Tree of Life and numerous other left-wing anti-Semitic organizations and people refer to the American government as, quote, ZOG, Zionist occupied government. Anti-Semitism is the most malleable of hatreds. It is the most flexible of bigotries. It's why Jews have been demonized over the millennia as enemies of Christianity and as enemies of Islam, of being dirty communists and greedy capitalists, of being globalists or too cosmopolitan, but also of being, quote, ethno-nationalists. Because anti-Semitism at its core is a uniquely fluid bigotry. It's rooted in conspiracy theories about dangerous Jews more than anything else. And so we can become any, quote, other that you want us to be. And it is this unique conspiracy theory nature of anti-Semitism which not only makes it so different from other forms of hate and intolerance, it also makes it so capable to ignite into violence wherever it's found on the political spectrum. It's why it's so crucial for us to understand the nature of this hatred, to be able to distinguish it from other forms of bigotry. Because when we ignore right-wing anti-Semitism, or we ignore left-wing anti-Semitism, we are in peril. Ignoring left-wing anti-Semitism and left-wing conspiracy theories that are tied to the convenient stand-in for anti-Semitism by calling themselves anti-Zionism leaves us in peril. It only serves to obfuscate those social forces that have brought us to where we are today, both in America and in Europe, where anti-Semitism is on the rise. And again, it's a relatively new thing for us. But in Europe, synagogues have needed armed guards, soldiers, for over a decade now. I was in Rome a few years ago on a Friday night, walking towards Trastevere, beautiful place, by the way, and I saw 14 fully armed national police in front of a tiny building. And sadly, I knew right away what it was. It was a synagogue. We went to talk to somebody who knew, was familiar with that synagogue, and they told me that that synagogue generally on a Friday night gets 11 to 15 people to come to pray. They had 14 fully armed guards in front of that show on a Friday night to guard 15 Jews. This brings me to the issue of the anti-Semitism that in America right now is flourishing as much, if not more, than the kind that animated Mr. Bowers. And that is the left-wing anti-Semitism that many of us avoid confronting. It's sometimes an anti-Semitism that is difficult for people to even appreciate. And it's one that many forces on the left in America try to minimize. One example of that is last April. Jewish Voices for Peace, who I'm going to call JVP from this point on because they're neither really Jewish nor for peace, posted a video by Linda Sarsour last April where she discussed anti-Semitism. Ironically, she champions herself as an anti-racism campaigner. And she said the following: I want to make the distinction that while anti-Semitism is something that impacts Jewish Americans, it's different than anti-black racism or Islamophobia because it's not systemic. Of course, you may experience vandalism or an attack on a synagogue, or maybe on an individual level, but it's not systemic, and we need to make that distinction. Unfortunate choice of words that she used last April, but it has important meaning. Underlying this pervasive point of view of so many, particularly in academia in America, is the notion that us Jews, who are often by those, particularly again, on the left, conflated with being white, something we should never say we are, by the way. White has always meant European, and I'm not European. I'm a Jew from Judea. But because of this conflation, there's this notion that we, as Jews in America, should, quote, check our privilege. Because the pervasive view, even among many well-meaning people, is that anti-Semitism just isn't as bad as other forms of racism. This academic notion has been captured in a concept called intersectionality, which now dominates discourse in many of the more, let's say, non-scientific parts of American universities. And in this intersectionality, every group that has been historically oppressed, mainly in America, but also in other parts of the world, is on a scale. And the only minority group that isn't on that scale at all are the Jews. So therefore, there's an intersectionality theory that says that a gay woman in San Francisco who's experiencing bigotry for being gay and also for being a woman has an intersection of persecution and oppression with a male Arab who is experiencing discrimination and oppression in Israel. That's the theory. Never mind that it's completely BS, but that theory is something that many academics profess, and many students, as a result, believe. It's so believed that we have on college campuses today a group called SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, who, much like JVP, don't really care for justice, and frankly don't really care for Palestinians, because they only protest things related to Israel. SJP has never done, to my knowledge, an event related to the treatment of Palestinians in Jordan, the treatment of Palestinians in Lebanon, the fact that 5,000 Palestinians were recently murdered in Syria. So Palestinian lives don't matter much to SJP. Jewish sovereignty, that's what bugs them. And they have on campus, in practically every college in America, very active organizations. And they have leadership that is blatantly anti-Semitic. I have here just a sampling of some of the things that SJP leaders have said and have been public about saying. These are posts on social media. One, Halima Eid, who's an SJP events coordinator at San Diego State, here in our backyard, tweeted, "Prepare for the Zionist apocalypse. They are the modern zombies who are after Palestinian flesh. Don't hesitate to slash their throats." Another SJP workshop leader said to @Barack Obama, "Shut up about gay marriage and go kill all the Jews." I could go on, you see I have a long list. All equally heinous. But our universities don't do anything about these people, don't do anything about SJP on these campuses, because under intersectionality theory, they're at the top of the oppression list, and Jews are way down here. So we should just shut up, according to Linda Sarsour, because our anti-Semitism against us is not, quote, systemic, and we should just, quote, check our privilege. But Linda Sarsour and others like her who promote this theory and who keep telling us to not really talk so much about anti-Semitism, they don't understand the draw of anti-Semitism. They don't understand its power. They don't understand the uniquely captivating and dangerous aspects of the conspiracy theories that animate it. It is why so often people don't see that their claims or actions are anti-Semitic. They view their behavior as being one of pursuing good, of pursuing justice. And think about this. Most forms of racism, based on how we understand it to be, requires, when you want to fight that racism, if you're fighting racism against African Americans, if you're fighting racism against Hispanics, if you're fighting bigotry against gays and lesbians, you are purporting to punch up against a secret society of oppressors, against a cabal of bad people who are engaging in that racism, who are engaging in that oppression. What the conspiracy theory of anti-Semitism does is it animates people to view going after Jews as speaking truth to power, because we are viewed as uniquely, demonically even, powerful. Anti-Semitism has morphed over the last 150 years, roughly, since the publication of the Protocols of Zion, Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was a fake document published by the Tsar and his secret police, to view this idea of this all-powerful Jew, this evil creature, this cunning, greedy, stealthy, wealthy, and powerful beyond measure caricature, this Voldemort. Well, if you're a person who views yourself as fighting for the oppressed, be they whoever you want it to be, whether you're a maniac like Bowers who somehow views white Europeans in America as being oppressed, or you're somebody marching for Black Lives Matter, who actually is marching on behalf of a historic